Arrival at Cactus City. Our ship touched down smoothly, just as it always did. Captain Sunlight, with her bright yellow scales shimmering under the alien sun, gripped the controls tightly as the ship's landing gear made contact with the landing pad. The pad was unlike anything I had encountered before. It wasn't just a simple platform on the ground. No, this one was perched high above, suspended atop a towering cactus tree. We had landed on what felt like the very tip of the world, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath us wasn't quite as stable as it seemed. The view from here was dizzying. Below, I could see the vast desert stretching endlessly, with sharp, jagged rock formations scattered throughout the arid expanse. The air was dry, and the sun burned brightly, casting long, sharp shadows over the red sand. "What's the situation, Cav?" I called into the comms as I unbuckled my harness. Cav, our pilot, responded quickly, his voice steady as usual. "Perfect landing, Captain. The locals are already here, waiting for the goods." The captain nodded, satisfied with Cav's usual efficiency. The cargo hold door began to open, revealing the wide, barren landscape stretching below us. From this height, it felt as though we were in another world entirely. The entire city was built high up on these giant cactus-like trees, which seemed to be reaching toward the blue sky like strange, giant spires. It was an extraordinary sight, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. I turned to Z, my companion and the ship's engineer, who was nervously shifting his weight from foot to foot in the cargo bay. Z wasn't exactly a fan of heights. No surprise there, as he was a mantis-like creature whose long limbs and agile form were more suited to solid ground than the swaying tops of trees. He flicked his antennae nervously, his 6 legs moving in an awkward dance as if trying to find solid footing in the swaying ship. His unease was palpable, but he didn't say anything. I suspected he was too proud to admit how much the heights were unsettling him. "Z," I said, grinning, "you okay up here?" He didn't respond immediately, but I saw his mandibles twitch in what I assumed was irritation. He cleared his throat and finally replied, "I'm fine. Let's get this over with." He tried to stand up straighter, angling his body to seem more confident, but I could tell he was still uneasy. I patted his back gently, trying not to laugh at how ridiculous he looked, towering nervously in the corner of the bay. I checked the gravity belt. I reassured him. "Everything is fully charged and good to go. If anything happens, you'll be floating like a feather." Z clicked his mandibles and gave a small, curt nod. "Fine," he said gruffly, but I could tell he was still uneasy. Despite his imposing insectoid exterior, I knew Z's confidence crumbled when it came to being high up in the air. The ship's hum continued as the cargo bay door finally opened completely, and the warm desert wind rushed inside. The heat hit me like a hammer. Even from here, I could smell the faint, sour odor of the local fruits that we had delivered. The tree grabbers had requested a specific set of fruits and equipment, and we were the ones who had been tasked with getting them here safely. This wasn't just a run-of-the-mill delivery mission. The grabbers were a fascinating species, towering tree dwellers with 4 arms and large ears, and they had asked for the human crew's assistance in transporting rare supplies from off-world. "Are you coming?" Z asked suddenly, breaking me from my thoughts. I turned to see him already halfway to the exit, the cargo sled floating behind him, the crates safely secured. I quickly followed suit, stepping out into the dry desert air. The sight of the alien landscape only grew more impressive as I emerged fully from the ship. The city below stretched far across the desert, built directly onto the trunks of colossal cactus trees. The structures were made of a blend of organic and artificial materials, seamlessly intertwined to create towering spires that pierced the sky. They were arranged in a way that made the city seem as though it was a natural part of the landscape, as though the trees themselves had grown into cities rather than having been built. The tree grabbers were already gathered near the landing pad. There were only a handful of them, but they made their presence known. Their bodies, large and muscular, were covered in a mix of scales and fur, their eyes large and expressive. They stood in the shadow of the enormous cactus tree, waiting for us with great patience, as if this was nothing out of the ordinary for them. The leader, a particularly tall and graceful grabber, stepped forward with a wave of his forearms. "Welcome to our city, travelers," he chirped, his voice a curious mix of chirps and melodic tones. "We are pleased to have you here. You've brought the goods." Z grunted behind me as he pulled the hover sled forward, the weight of the crates making the otherwise effortless task look somewhat laborious. I stepped forward, greeting the leader in the best approximation of the local greeting I had learned during our journey. I had spent hours practicing their high-pitched, melodic language, which, to my human ears, sounded a bit like a bird's song being played in slow motion. It wasn't perfect, but it would suffice. The leader responded with a brief song-like trill, then switched to the trade language that we could understand. "We are delighted to smell you," he said, extending his arms in a gesture of respect. I couldn't help but smile at the oddness of the greeting. "And we you," I replied, feeling my voice falter slightly as I tried to match their rhythm. Z shifted the crates into place, the aliens surrounding him as they began to inspect the merchandise. One of the grabbers carefully opened the crates, releasing a pungent, sour odor into the air. The fruits were unlike anything I had ever seen. Strange, round, spiky things with deep red skin that looked like something straight out of a nightmare. "Wonderful," said the leader with a satisfied hum. "These will serve our city well." He clapped his forearms together and motioned for us to follow. "Please, if you will, we have a tour prepared. A chance to see the handpath that leads through our city." I glanced back at C, who was busy ensuring the hover sled was properly secured. He gave me a weary look, clearly dreading the idea of walking through the city, but I knew better than to argue with the grabbers. This was part of their tradition, a customary tour for off-world traders. "Lead the way," I said. And with that, the grabber took us toward the handpath. The handpath, I quickly realized, was not an ordinary route. It was a narrow walkway suspended high above the city, carved out of the cactus tree trunks themselves, leading us deeper into their vast, multi-layered city. From here, we had the most breathtaking view of the surrounding desert, and I couldn't help but marvel at how the grabbers had managed to build such a magnificent city atop these colossal, towering trees. As we walked along the path, the sheer size of the cactus trees became more apparent. It was almost as if we were walking through the middle of a forest of skyscrapers, the city stretching higher and higher, seemingly endless. The air grew warmer as we climbed higher, but the view from here was enough to keep me captivated. Below, I could see the sprawling desert, dotted with even more of these massive cactus trees, and in the distance, I could make out the buildings of the ground-based grabber cities. The tour continued, but I had already lost track of the conversation, my mind caught in the splendor of it all. I was just beginning to understand how far-reaching the grabbers' world truly was. I was no longer just delivering supplies. I was witnessing a whole new way of life, one that had evolved in perfect harmony with the land they called home. And, as we continued to ascend, I couldn't help but wonder, what else did these people have to teach me about their way of life? A city above the desert. As we ascended higher, the landscape unfolded before us like a living tapestry. The handpath twisted and turned around the trunks of the towering cactus trees, some so large they could have been mistaken for ancient monuments. The trees themselves seemed to pulse with life, their bark smooth but thick, their spiny branches reaching upward in impossible angles. The grabber city, built into these mighty trees, was an architectural wonder, seamlessly integrated with nature. The buildings, no, the structures, were not mere constructions of stone and steel. They grew directly from the trunks, like natural extensions of the trees themselves. Each structure had an organic flowing design, as if the grabbers had learned to mold the very plants they called home into homes and public spaces. There were no sharp edges or rigid corners. Everything was rounded and fluid, as though the city had grown rather than been built. The natural curves of the cactus trees allowed for rooms to expand in ways that would have been impossible for other civilizations. In the distance, I could see the largest buildings, which seemed to climb higher than the rest. These towering spires appeared to have grown naturally from the branches of their parent trees, with connecting walkways made of fine wooden planks and vines, each twist and turn carved with precision. We passed several tree grabber families working together in small open-air workshops. The crafts they created were nothing short of spectacular. Some of them were carving intricate designs into stone, while others worked with the fibers from the cactus trees, weaving them into fabrics that had an iridescent glow. The air was thick with the smell of the desert, but it was also filled with the rich scent of craftsmanship, wood, stone, and the spicy perfumes of the local plants. The sound of small tools tapping against stone was a rhythm I could not have predicted, and yet it felt like a familiar lullaby. The handpath led us toward a massive open plaza, flanked by towering cactus trees that formed a sort of natural amphitheater. In the center, there was a large tree grabber sculpture made from a strange, glistening metal that I hadn't seen before. It was a statue, but unlike anything from Earth, it seemed to move, shifting and reshaping, as though it were alive. The surface of the statue reflected the desert light in a dazzling display, but I quickly realized the trick. The material used in its creation was made of tiny mechanical components that adjusted with the temperature, allowing it to continuously change shape, a fascinating and living work of art. As we walked deeper into the city, the conversation with our guide, whom I now learned was called Chirp, continued. He spoke proudly of his people's resilience and ingenuity, explaining how the hand path had been the central route of the city for generations. It connected the upper levels of the cactus city to the lower ones, offering both symbolic and practical value. This path is not just a way to navigate our city, Chirp said with a tone of pride. It represents the connection between the sky and the earth. The tree grabbers have always been bound to the trees, to the sky above, and to the desert below. This city is our home, but it is also a living connection to the greater universe. He gestured around us as we reached the center of the plaza. From here, the view was mesmerizing. Endless stretches of red desert, dotted with more giant cactus trees, their towering forms dotting the landscape like silent sentinels. It was humbling, to say the least. I had seen planets teeming with cities before, but there was something different about this place. Here, the very land seemed to be intertwined with the inhabitants. The city wasn't just built on the land, it grew with it. But it wasn't all just serene beauty. The sense of community was palpable. The grabbers seemed to operate as a collective, with every citizen playing a crucial role. Each section of the city was designed to make use of the natural resources that surrounded them. Their power came from solar and wind sources. There were no heavy industrial machines polluting the air. The city hummed with an almost organic energy, a balance that was perfectly maintained. What about the ground cities? I asked, curious. How do the tree grabbers manage to interact with the ground dwellers? Chirp smiled knowingly and began to lead us toward a set of wide steps that spiraled up around the base of one of the larger cactus trees. Ah, the Mesa people. They live far below, closer to the ground, where the desert winds are harsher and the cactus trees are sparse. They are the builders, he said with reverence. They use the stone and the earth to create their homes. But we, the tree grabbers, we are the nurturers. We care for the trees, and they care for us. I paused for a moment, watching Chirp as he carefully made his way up the steps, his long arms gripping the side of the cactus tree with ease. The idea of such harmony between the tree dwellers and the ground dwellers intrigued me. It was almost as though they were two halves of a whole, each playing a distinct role in maintaining the delicate balance of life on this planet. I followed Chirp up the winding steps, noticing how the steps seemed to blend seamlessly into the bark of the cactus. We reached a small plateau where several tree grabbers were engaged in what appeared to be a form of communal gathering. Their social structure was fascinating. Here, there was no sign of hierarchy. Instead, they all seemed to work in harmony, each taking their turn performing tasks, whether it was maintaining the infrastructure of the city or sharing in the cultivation of the cactus fruit that was so essential to their diet. Chirp continued, "The Mesa people may be ground dwellers, but they are just as important to us. Without them, we wouldn't have the stability that the trees give us. Our species are inseparable, and we work together to maintain balance." As I stood there, taking in the sight of the thriving city, I couldn't help but think about the human race and how much we still had to learn from these peaceful yet industrious beings. Our own cities were often rigid, towering structures, built on the backs of the earth without regard for the land beneath them. But here, in this magnificent city, it was as though the people and the planet were one. There was no harsh separation between the two. The hand path's secret. As the tour continued, Chirp led us into a smaller, quieter section of the city, where the sounds of the bustling streets and communal gathering faded into a peaceful silence. We stood before a large platform made from smooth stone, a place where the city's inhabitants could gather to meditate or hold small discussions. The platform had a strange quality about it. Its surface felt warm to the touch, almost as though it were alive. This is the heart of the path, the center of our connection with the earth and sky. Chirp explained softly, his voice filled with reverence. It is said that those who come here can hear the heartbeat of the desert. I looked around at the calm, serene faces of the tree grabbers who had gathered in a circle around the platform. They were speaking in quiet tones, exchanging words and thoughts in their melodic language, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. It was clear that the hand path wasn't just a physical route, it was a spiritual journey, one that had meaning beyond just the act of traveling. "Is this where the Mesa people come to meet the tree grabbers?" I asked, intrigued by the peaceful nature of the gathering. Chirp nodded. "Yes, it is where the two halves of our people come together in unity. The hand path connects not just our homes, but our hearts." As we stood there, surrounded by the peaceful energy of the city, I couldn't help but feel that there was something more here, something profound about how these beings had learned to live in such harmony with their world. As we continued our walk, I began to feel more and more like I was part of something larger, a connection that spanned the galaxy itself. The city above the desert wasn't just a place to visit. It was a testament to the idea that, no matter where we come from, the bond between us all could be strong enough to reshape the universe. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the place where humanity and the alien species would finally find a common ground. The singing journey, deep into Cactus City. The hand path wound its way deeper into the heart of the Cactus City, taking us higher and higher, each step revealing a new level of the grabber's sprawling urban landscape. As I walked alongside Chirp, I marveled at how the city grew organically from the towering cactus trees, seamlessly integrating the environment with the structures. It was almost as though the trees had chosen to build with their own branches, offering their strength and support to those who sought refuge beneath their towering limbs. At this altitude, the view was breathtaking. The desert stretched out in all directions, its red sands rolling like a vast ocean beneath the burning sun. The air felt dry, but crisp, and the occasional breeze carried the scent of the strange, spiky fruits the grabbers cultivated. It was a world both alien and familiar, where the line between nature and civilization was blurred beyond recognition. As we continued up, I noticed that the hand path was not just a series of well-worn steps or a simple method of navigation. It was a ritual, a journey that the grabbers had been making for centuries. The path was considered a pilgrimage, a means of honoring their ancient bond with the trees. With each turn, each step upward, I realized the hand path symbolized something far greater than just a physical connection to the city. It was a spiritual bond between the grabbers and their environment. It felt like a shared journey, one that stretched far beyond the physical world and into the realm of their beliefs and culture. Chirp's voice broke my reverie as he spoke. "You see, the trees have always been our protectors. They give us shelter, they give us sustenance, and they allow us to build a life that is balanced and sustainable. We honor them with the handpath. It is our way of showing our gratitude, our way of remembering our ancestors. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. The usual hustle and bustle of the city seemed to fade away, and I found myself immersed in the beauty of the path. The sounds of the desert, the occasional gust of wind, the distant calls of the ground dwellers below, became a background hum. Here on the handpath, the only sounds were our footsteps, the rhythmic tapping of our boots against the smooth stone of the path, and the soft hum of Chirp's voice as he continued his tale. We, the tree grabbers, are bound by the sky and the earth, Chirp explained, his voice filled with the same reverence I had seen in the faces of the other grabbers. Our people came from the ground, like the Mesa people, but over time, we learned that the trees could provide a life that was more sustainable, more attuned to the rhythm of the desert. As we grew, we adapted, and the trees adapted with us. I watched as Chirp effortlessly navigated the path ahead, his limbs graceful and fluid, despite the height. I couldn't help but feel like a mere traveler in a world that had been carefully crafted over eons. The paths had been carved into the living trees, the designs flowing organically, and every step seemed to have been taken with intention, as though each part of this city was a tribute to the past. We reached a large plateau, a sprawling open space that jutted out from the trunk of one of the tallest cactus trees. Here, the handpath seemed to converge, leading to several different directions. The plateau had been transformed into an open garden, a center of knowledge for the tree grabbers. This is our elders' garden, where knowledge is passed from one generation to the next, Chirp said, gesturing to the large stone tablets placed carefully in the corners of the space. The symbols etched on these stones were strange, their meanings lost to me, but there was no mistaking the reverence with which the grabbers approached them. Several grabbers, old and young, sat around the garden, discussing the latest findings or simply sharing stories from their ancestors. The elders' garden was a place where the wisdom of their people was preserved and cultivated. I was invited to sit with one of the elders, a stoic grabber with fur as silver as moonlight. Her eyes were large and wise, with a gentle yet piercing gaze. She offered me a seat next to her, and I obliged, eager to learn more about the culture of this fascinating species. I see you are a token human. The elder spoke in the same melodic, chirping language I had heard earlier. She didn't need to speak any further, though, for Chirp was already translating. Yes, I suppose that's one way to describe it, I replied, slightly amused. I'm here on a mission, but I've always been curious about how different species live and work together. The elder nodded, her sharp, antenna-like ears twitching slightly. Curiosity is the greatest gift, young one. It is the one thing that binds all species, despite the stars between us. Her eyes met mine. You are here at a crucial time, a time when we are learning much from your kind. What you call humanity is a concept we have long sought to understand. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean by that? The elder paused, considering her words carefully. Your species, she began slowly, is one of contradictions. You are both fragile and strong, short-sighted yet capable of great foresight. You destroy and yet you create. Your wars are as destructive as your peace is powerful. You are a species torn between survival and domination. And we, the tree grabbers, have watched you with great interest. Her words struck me in an unexpected way. She wasn't just speaking as an observer. She was speaking as someone who had studied humanity deeply, someone who understood the complexity of our existence better than most people on Earth ever could. Why is it important for you to understand us? I asked, genuinely curious. Because, she answered softly, we believe you will be the ones to show us the future, the nature of harmony and conflict. I sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on her words. The idea that humanity could teach another species about the future was both humbling and overwhelming. Our species had always been defined by our ability to adapt, to survive. But were we truly ready to lead other species? Were we capable of bridging the gaps between worlds, between cultures, and truly creating a unified future. Chirp seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere and quickly changed the subject, guiding us toward the next part of the city. As we continued on the path, I couldn't shake the weight of the elder's words. Humanity had long believed itself to be the most advanced species in the universe, yet here, in this tranquil desert world, I was witnessing an entire society that had perfected the art of harmony with nature and the environment. The contrast was striking. The deeper we ventured into the city, the more I felt like an outsider, someone who was only just beginning to understand the complex relationships between different species, between the land and the people who lived on it. The tree grabbers had evolved in perfect harmony with the desert, with their city built upon the ancient cactus trees that sustained them. They had learned to adapt, to balance their technological advancements with their reverence for nature, and perhaps, just perhaps, humanity could learn something from them. As we walked, I began to wonder if this journey was not just about delivering supplies. Maybe this was the beginning of something much larger, a shared path that would allow our species to understand one another, to bridge the divide that had separated us for so long. And maybe, just maybe, this was where the future of the galaxy began.